if you are in an environment where the resources are unlimited, I believe femininity will naturally take over and guide the masculine. And
so in a resource-rich environment, where there isn't scarcity, where do you see masculine energy thriving the most? What do we have to do in that environment?
Yeah. Wow.
So Rick, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time out here on a Monday morning to tell us a little bit about your work with men. If you could start off, could you give us sort of an intro of your background, what you do professionally, how it ties into men, and specifically dating and relationships that they have with women?
Yeah. So I'm Rick Taylor. I've had a therapy practice since 2013, originally I worked mostly with men, but I work with adults and couples. And before that, I had a 20-year career working my way up in IT and got into leadership and all the drama that comes with that. And so I went back to school, got a graduate degree, and then opened up my practice.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So how long have you been a practicing therapist now? How many years?
12 years.
12 years. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And who do you work with primarily? Men, women, couples, people with, early childhood trauma, addiction issues. What's sort of your specialty?
Yeah. So I started out working only with men. At the time, there wasn't a lot of therapy specifically for men, and it is different. And then a lot of guys started going to school and starting their practice. So I've shifted mostly to working. I have a niche where I work with high conflict couples, where the conflict just doesn't go anywhere, and they can barely talk to each other, and or they've divorced and there's still high conflict going on. I see a fair amount of narcissism and borderline disorders in those situations.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
that's some tricky stuff. But along the way, I've had little niches.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, I'll throw this out. In therapy, the money in therapy is in couples, addiction, kids, and couples. They already say couples.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah,
there's some niches in there, and I've barely scratching the couples niche. So
okay,
it's not in working with men. I'll say it that way.
Okay. So why is that? Are men less drawn to therapy in today's version of that?
Yeah.
You said you started by working with men. Was there a need that need to be filled, and that allowed you to build a career? How did that kind of play out?
Yeah. I've been involved with nonprofits before I started the therapy for like 20 years. One of them is called Mankind Project, but also other types of group organizations that were just for men, leadership, that kind of thing. And then when I had to go to therapy for myself, for couples therapy, I've been through a divorce. I hated it. I hated therapy, and it wasn't for me. It was like, and the therapist was a woman, and she aligned with my wife at the time, and come to find out that's actually really, really common. And so I specialized in working with men in the beginning. Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of guys listening to this podcast, they've been dragged to a couples therapy session. I know I've been to a fair amount, and in my experience, every couples therapy session that I've been to has been wildly different. None of them look the same. Luckily, in my experience, I haven't felt that the person I was working with sided with anyone too much, but I was actually speaking with a woman last night when I was out with some friends, and she was talking about an experience. Her husband was struggling to feel heard. He felt ganged up on, actually, sort of in that. And you're saying that's fairly common for
really common. Yeah.
Really common.
Yeah. We can get into it. I will say that the masculine and the feminine approach to solving problems is very, very different.
Yeah.
And I think that's the crux of the issue. And because I'm masculine, or a woman is more feminine, usually, they're going to believe that that's a better approach. And their approach is better. My approach is better. And a therapist who's done their work, or anybody, any facilitator or coach, if they've done their work, they can appreciate both sides and play to both sides.
Yeah. So, and not just resonate more naturally with one and sort of leave the other one feeling on the outside a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have a different approach in working with men in therapy? Do you have different techniques? Do you go about it differently?
Yeah. So I like to think of it like two guys are meeting on a golf course and they're going to talk about the game. And when they do that, they're usually shoulder to shoulder looking down the fairway. And it's like, here we are. It's 300 yards that way. That's where the ball's going to go. It's a very masculine approach of movement, direction for an outcome. And so in therapy, I like to work that way. I like to have, here's what we're going to work on. Here's why we're trying to get to this outcome. And the shoulder to shoulder part when I'm working is I use the whiteboard a lot. So we're looking at something together instead of a more feminine approach, which is eye to eye and talking about feelings.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, guys are not really up for that.
Right. Well, maybe do they get there eventually? Do the feelings come out? Just it's like in a different order, you know?
Yeah. Masculinity naturally is oriented towards competing, and we've been programmed. A lot of men have been programmed to just immediately, if there's another man in proximity, okay, what do I have to do to compete with this guy?
Right.
And so there's hell no, I'm not going to talk about my feelings and be vulnerable.
Well, I think that comes back to the idea of competency. You know, as a man, feeling competent is a lot of what I'm bringing to the table, you know, and, you know, fitness, money, all those types of things. Those are just outcomes of a competent individual, you know, that has discipline, that has self-awareness. And I think the competition that we feel with other guys, well, we don't want to just lay down our competency and accept another man's, because that's sort of giving away our, our goods that we've worked towards getting. Does that sound healthy to you? Like a healthy sort of maybe motivational background to that to the competition that you're seeing?
Yeah. Most guys have, by the time you get to about 30, we've had enough competition in life that we have found our place and how we want to handle the competency of other men and competing with them. Work, if you just think about the structure of workplace, it's a hierarchy. So the higher up you go, the more competitive it is. And same with sports, same with school. And so it's a very masculine way to think. And if you think about it, if I'm being masculine, I'm going to have my own outcome that I want, and I believe I know how to get there. And another guy comes along and says, no, you need to go this way. So now we're going to compete in this competition of ideas. And so in therapy, I don't even bother with that. Let's build some trust by talking about common outcomes that, you know, for you. And so
that's the shoulder to shoulder facing down the fairway together, rather than sort of eye to eye and butting heads in whose idea is better.
Right. Yeah. There's some really cool stuff about all that, right? Just that right there, like in a company, because I was in startups. It was very kind of militaristic and macho, a lot of that going on. And there would always be a PowerPoint up on a screen somewhere and people talking. But then when the lights came on and it became personal, eye to eye, you could really tell the difference in who's the leader and who are the followers.
Yeah.
And
so as just a side note, so you know, the way you're describing this sounds like what a lot of us go through, all humans, men and women, go through. And what you're describing matches the structure, you know, socially in the workplace, in the school, you know, and all these things. So this really does speak to what a lot of women are talking about, where they felt like it's a man's world or a man's game. And, you know, because, you know, women, we're saying this is the way guys relate. Well, a woman in that situation is maybe not going to feel like she gets the game, you know, she's playing a different game. But if that's the game that establishes who's the boss and who's the employee, that would feel very unfair, right?
Yes, especially if it's not your natural style.
Mhm.
And so I don't know if you want to get into this. This is a rabbit hole of, so that form of masculinity, being the leader of the two, works when resources are limited.
Mm.
Money, time, effort, food, water, clothing, shelter. When we grow up without resources, we have to compete for them. And masculinity does tend to be more competitive than femininity.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it takes the lead. If you are in an environment where the resources are unlimited, I believe femininity will naturally take over and guide the masculine. And at best, the two can work together as they move in a direction. They rely on each other. And
So this makes me wonder,
okay,
how well can a masculine energy thrive
yeah,
in a resource-rich environment like that? Because
right,
I mean, I've at least experienced that without challenge, without adversity, and
right,
and healthy competition, without that,
yeah,
the best version of myself simply cannot come out.
right,
When I'm chilled, relaxed, sitting on the couch, and I've got unlimited internet, unlimited pizza and potato chips, and unlimited beer,
yeah,
that is not going to be, that's not going to ignite the fire in me. That
right,
is what I consider to be the sexiest, most attractive man, inside of me. And I'm not going to feel healthy,
yes,
in my masculine energy.
right,
So
right,
in a resource rich environment,
yeah,
where there isn't scarcity, where do you see masculine energy thriving the most? What do we have to do in that environment?
yeah. Wow. Because we're headed there. That is the question of the era, because we're getting ready to have unlimited energy sources. I don't know, 2 years, 5 years, maybe. We'll have an energy source in our backyard that all of a sudden we got to answer this question. So I still believe that masculinity still needs to be there, and it still needs to be the guiding between the two, feminine and masculine. I still believe masculine needs to be the direction oriented of the two, because that's what it is. It is direction oriented. It doesn't need to be hyper masculine, and that's the difference. Hyper masculinity is something you need in a foxhole. It's when you're on the battlefield. It's when you're in crisis. When the hurricane's coming, that's when you need hyper masculinity. We got to get this done. We got to do this, and we got to get done here. And not a whole lot of room for feeling.
Yep.
And so I think in an environment where the resources are plentiful, we still need direction, especially in our relationships.
So what's
Yeah.
interesting is when the resources are scarce, the
Yes.
direction is kind of defined for us. We know we
Yes.
need water because we need that to survive, or we know we need to build this wall and protect us from the neighboring tribe
Yeah.
that's going to come and attack us.
Yeah.
The direction is set by survival, really,
Yes.
when resources are finite.
Right.
But when survival is no longer on the line, when resources are plentiful,
Right.
is that, those were extrinsic directions and goals that were set for us.
Right.
Is it your feeling that these now need to become even more intrinsic goals that we set for ourselves in order for that to
Yeah.
come out?
Yeah. What do you want your life to look like? How many kids do you want to have? What kind of parent do you want to be? That kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the outcomes are still there. The destination, it's all still there. It's just not as critical. And so that allows both masculine and feminine to work together better. And I should say right here, there's a lot of men. I tend to believe, this is not clinical, but I tend to believe that we both carry masculine and feminine behaviors.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Men carry, the majority is mostly masculine. Women are mostly feminine, but and we tend to attract people who are our equal in opposite, if that makes sense. I have this much masculinity. I want a woman with this much femininity.
So if I'm a 70% masculine guy, 30% feminine man, I'm gonna more or less attract a 30% masculine woman and 70% feminine woman.
Right.
That and is that maybe why we see, the super jacked, toxic alpha male who's like, I'm all man, 95, 99% masculine, and the the very, very, very feminine woman,
Yes.
they tend to like, and then you have this huge football player and this tiny little girl,
Yeah.
like on
That's
his
right.
arm.
Yeah.
It's almost comical,
Yeah.
to see this matching up.
Yeah. And to fulfill his hyper masculine style, he will either create conflict or create problems, create issues for him to fix, or he'll go chase them. So he'll join the military. He'll get into sports and sports are great. Sports are very like direction and outcome. I mean, real simple. And so,
not to mention a healthy outlet for that energy.
absolutely.
Because a guy that's like that, he might be just born with that amount of intensity inside him.
Yeah.
And it's not bad to have that intensity.
We need those guys.
Yeah, and especially when the aliens land and we need to take care of business, we want as many of those standing here as possible.
Right.
Yeah, but again, they're finding the healthy, way of exercising that. And one thing that I've noticed with the men that I work with is a lot of guys, and maybe they're not the hyper masculine type, but a lot of them, they try to exercise their masculinity with their female partner.
Right.
And the female partner's like, what the heck? Like, I am not built for this. And I don't know that a lot of them have the awareness of like, hey, you should go work that out with your buddies on a football field or wherever.
Right.
In your couples counseling, is that something that you see come up a bit?
I see it come up when a wife, for example, has a job that is pretty masculine, and like she's in a leadership role. She's managing people. Managing people is a very masculine, or it can be for the most part. If you think about it, I'm sticking with movement, direction, and outcomes.
Right.
That's a managerial role, and then she comes home to a family with kids and a husband, and she's got to switch that off. And not everyone can do that. Same with guys. Guys come home from managing or working and just work in general, depending on how masculine it is. They can't switch it off. And so I've seen things like the wife. This gets really interesting. If she makes more money, is that the source of power between the two?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of guys will feel intimidated. They will feel like they will feel like their role is diminished when their wife is making significantly more money than them, for sure.
Right.
I'm curious. So coming back from the workplace into the home, you're in a different context. Do you have any techniques or tricks or practices that people can do to transition between work mode, home mode, relationship mode, parenting mode, so that they're not just, I was managing people in the office, now I'm just going to manage people in the living room. Have you worked out any effective techniques?
It's nothing really sexy. It's take a breath before you pull into the driveway and go into the house and reset yourself. If you've got a partner that's open to it, a lot of people who align to the feminine, they get it out, so to speak, by talking about it. So if you're a guy and you've got a woman in this way, let her talk it out and try not to fix it, because that's what masculinity wants to do, is to fix it. And so it's an investment that I'm going to listen for about 10 minutes, and hopefully in an hour, we're going to be right back to, I'm the masculine, she's the feminine, and we're good. So it's an investment
but you want to hold that interim space for the person to transition, let some of the things out. Well, essentially, if you're saying, hey, I'm going to just listen to you, what'd you say? In a one way. I mean, I'm just going to listen to you. Doing that, what you're really saying is, I'm going to let you drop into your feminine during this period, and I'm going to let you get comfortable with it, and sort of like doing a trust fall on me in a discussion. And it's like, oh, see, you can land over and over and over, and that might help her let go of the grip, that she had to have in the workplace. Right.
When it doesn't. And that's hard. That's hard to do for both people. And so playing that out, the more extreme is guys get stuck. If you think of those three steps: masculinity, action, direction, outcome. If the outcome is being determined by someone else, I'll start to get stuck. Like, well, what the hell? Why should I even try? And I'll still take action in a direction, but it won't be really going anywhere. It'll just be sort of this cycle of useless action.
I called it a holding pattern.
Oh yeah,
You're circling the airport, burning fuel, and not going
Right.
anywhere at the same time.
Right. So I'll see wives who work the majority between the two. She puts in the most hours or whatever, and she'll want help around the house. All right, husband, I need you to do the laundry. I need you to do this with the kids. And the guy's like, okay, but I won't do it as well as you are because I'm not you. And so she'll take it to the next step and make a list, a task list, and put it up on the kitchen counter, and check it off when you're done. And it still doesn't work. Now she's micromanaging, and she's trying to use a masculine approach to manage her masculine man.
Right. So for me, when I hear that, I'm thinking, okay, he just becomes another one of the kids with a list of chores, and so the way that I like to talk about this with guys is, there are things that needs to get done. She's talking about problems. And again, we try to fix her.
Right.
The way I actually like to look at it is like, guys, you need to look in a larger perspective and look at what needs to be fixed in the environment around her and get ahead of it.
Yeah.
Go take her car to the car wash and do it on your own. Start taking on some initiative, because what I've noticed is that women tend to, I don't know, they have a natural sort of instinct, and it will seem random that they're washing this, putting that away, doing this, talking with somebody, and somehow they're I guess multitasking, but I just look at it as spontaneously sort of doing a bunch of things, and it all happens. Where I, as a guy, tend to be much more procedural, where I'm going to do this, now I'm doing that, now I'm doing that. But I think as a guy, if you just take a big chunk and remove it, from it, go trim the tree that hasn't been trimmed, but that is weighing on her mind and stressing her out.
Right.
When you do that, she will naturally just sort of do all the other things. But if you don't, or you ask her what it is that, what needs to be done, what's weighing on her, take the thing that's weighing on her and remove it, proactively. Because if you're following her lead, I can't help but see that when it really turns into a list on the refrigerator, I mean, you're just one of the kids, and she's going to see you as a mother, and that's going to impact her ability to relax, with you. That's going to impact her trust. She's going to feel like it ultimately is still going to fall on her. And it's really going to impact, I think, the dynamic in the bedroom. Like she's just not going to be turned on by a guy that she's having to give chores to like a son. Right.
I'm seeing it a lot. It's a really tough place that we're in right now as a culture. Women are graduating from college. They're a lot more of them are making as much or more money in white collar positions. And so in suburban marriages, this is really, really common. And it's hard. It's tough. It's a tough, visceral, because we don't know what it is. We don't have words for it. We just know as a man, God, it just doesn't fit. I don't like this, but I don't know what to do about it, because she's, I have my resume and it is what it is, and she has hers, and shit, it's frustrating.
It is. And it's frustrating because you've made this commitment. You're in this bonded situation. So it's not like you can just walk away. I mean, if you're dating or, early stages of relationship, yes, you can. But if you're married, and particularly if you have children, but I mean, you are bonded, and trying to sort that out from inside of a very limited environment, where you're bumping into somebody, any way I move is going to affect her. That is a huge challenge.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is it's just masculine and feminine behaviors that tend to bump into each other. And so asking the question, if we have an environment where the resources are not limited, they're unlimited resources, we really do as a culture need to figure that out, because it's the hypermasculinity that's driving things, has been driving things since humanity. And with unlimited resources coming up, we will either recreate a crisis, so there's limited resources, or will be I would say they'll be captured and profit. There'll be a small group of people who profit from those resources, and everyone else is like, yeah, but they should be free. And
those both sound like horrible ways for things to play out. They really do.
Yeah. And the potential is so awesome, but we really, as we need to figure out a version of masculinity that can handle something like universal pay, for example. What are men going to do with purpose when they make an income that they don't have to work for? That's tough.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, my personal thing is, your finances, they should never be your purpose. They should never be what actually gives you a sense of it, because when you play that game, there's always going to be somebody who's got a bigger boat, a bigger jet, a bigger house, I mean, a hotter wife. I mean, there's always going to be, so that, that doesn't work when you're dealing with resources as the actual measurement of value and purpose. For me, but they're closely tied. It's very hard for a man to feel confident about himself without his resources being on point.
Right.
So the trick is to find in my opinion, the trick is to find the intrinsic motivators that actually drove us and actually created enough value that not somehow, but we're creating, money flows according to value and service. That's how it works economically. You have something of value and you are providing you're providing a service to the world with that thing of value.
Right.
As a result of intrinsically providing these things, I'm getting increasing amounts of wealth. The wealth is just an easy way to see that the value and service is actually taking place. And I think when the resources become more universally available, we're going to have to be even more subtle in listening to what the intrinsic value and services that we're actually providing for the world.
Right.
And those might sound like cliche terms, but when it comes down to on a daily basis, what do I provide for the world? And this is something like I've really been thinking about this lately with charisma. A charismatic person provides service and value to every social scene that they walk into. Maybe if they're like a DJ, maybe they make money on it, but a lot of people don't make money in exchange for that. But those are the sorts of things that might actually become a little bit more valuable, in an environment like that.
Right. If you're going to buy a car, you want to know you can go back to your guy and get it fixed, and you develop a relationship that's long term. It's less transactional. I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
Very true.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope we can make this transition, because it just sounds like we'll have more mom and pop stores in our cities and towns. It'll be more personal, more interactive, and less transactional and cold. And so it's not about we got to be less masculine. It's use that masculinity to make things happen with other people instead of white knuckling your way through by yourself.
Absolutely.
So it does bring up this concept we were going to talk about codependency, and because getting needs met, right? How we get those needs met if they're not being met, that's basically the origin of codependency. And so how we handle not getting our needs met. So what you were saying, the intrinsic motivation, I've thought about this a lot. It's like money is not the real reason. It's what money can do for us. If we use it, if we spend money on certain things. If I want to get respect, I can buy a fancy car, and people will look at me. They'll look at my car, right? And it'll feel like respect.
No, they'll look at you coming out of the car and going into the car. They'll notice you too. But
it's not the money, right? It's that sense that I'm going to earn this respect somehow by getting a car.
Correct.
Or I'm going to buy a nice house for my woman, and she'll be happy with me and love me. And love, appreciation, respect, and acknowledgement. Those are the four basics. And so money is more like if you wanted to go to Pittsburgh and you're driving and you saw the sign, 100 miles to Pittsburgh. If you just stopped right there and looked at the sign, sign Pittsburgh, that's money. actually going to Pittsburgh is the payoff. And so a lot of us get stuck with, I'm just going to go after the sign,
right,
and not go all the way. So
well, that sign, let me just add this one little piece to
yeah,
that sign is, in a way, when we look at it in terms of a bank account, and how much money you have sitting in there, it does tell you how many miles you can travel. It does tell
that's
you
true.
your capacity, the places you can
It's
go.
valuable. Yeah.
But it is to your point, it's all merely potential when it's in that form.
Right. Right.
And that store of energy and that potential is very seductive and attractive and sexy to both sexes.
Yes.
It really is. But absolutely, it's an interim step to the actual experience you're going to have.
Yeah. Right.
So tell us more about this. The codependency, and we were talking about this the other night at the event. How codependency actually has it's maps very closely to the nice guy syndrome that a lot of guys work with. So can you give us the quick layout on how those kind of lay?
So at its core, codependency is the part of it is there's at least two people. One person needs to get their needs. Well, both need to get their needs met, but the way they do it is let's say I'm one person, and I've been programmed either in my childhood for whatever reason to keep your emotions calm. And so I'm going to become overly responsible for your well-being and for your emotions. And I'll try and keep you happy and make sure that you don't get into drama. I do this, either escalate or shut down. Okay. And meanwhile, the other person is exploiting the first one because they want those needs met. And if the other person doesn't provide them, they'll create the drama. And so it becomes this cycle of let me manage your drama. And the other person's like, well, if I don't get my needs met, I'm going to do the drama. So you better watch out. And it's just this ongoing cycle.
And you had mentioned that this term kind of came up first in the Al-Anon groups. Is that correct?
Yeah. In the 80s, it came out of Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. And the reason, like I said, I use the word programming. It usually happens in childhood where we have parents or a parent or somebody in authority is emotionally volatile. You're going home from school. You have no idea what the house is going to look like today. What are we in for today? Yeah. And so you brace yourself, and over time you learn to help manage the environment. And that's the setup for, that becomes a template for how you behave in later relationships.
Cool. So tell us now, nice guys, when they're dating, when they're in a relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically it's a codependent relationship where the nice guy has been programmed to believe that if I take care of your needs, and that's great. And here's the kicker, but I expect something back in return. And if I don't get it, then I will do my drama. And so it's an expectation.
Yeah.
If I buy dinner, I want a little something at the end, and if I don't get it, then I'm going to create some drama.
And just to be clear, this is the unhealthy way that a guy goes about dating. Being in a relationship is this a direct expectation, almost a transactional back and forth.
There you go.
But particularly if the reciprocity isn't even expressed, it's not even made clear to the person, and then we'll get pouty or petulant or angry or moody or anything because the person didn't somehow know what we were expecting in return.
It sounds crazy, but
no, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, I'm a really nice guy, it makes sense to me. But it absolutely doesn't work very well. Yeah.
Right. And I don't even know I'm doing it most of the time because it's been such ingrained in me. I don't even know I do it.
So that goes right into my next question is so we do this. So it's a pattern. It's coming from childhood. It's from a usually very turbulent, unpredictable power figure in our lives.
Yes.
And so we've developed this pattern behavior essentially to try to regulate the environment. And maybe this is a bit of an exaggeration, but we're trying to survive.
Yeah.
This behavior is helping us make our survival a little more manageable.
Right.
So
right.
For me, from like not day one, but for me from early days, this is normal. How in the world do I become aware of the fact, one, that I'm even doing this, and then two, I become aware of it? What else do I do? How do I unhook myself from it? Let's start with the first one. How can a guy become aware that he's being a nice guy and having this codependency pattern play out?
Yeah. Great question. You can look at the symptoms, which we'll get into here in a second. But if you have a pattern of those symptoms in your life, you're probably doing it. And here's the thing. I mean, we have to say this, that it's normal to have some transactions in every relationship. I mean, like we talked about before, we're doing this podcast. I'm loving this, and you're offering it. But if I wasn't loving it, I would probably say something, and I'd do my best to make it clean and clear, and you would do your best to adjust. But if I was an ass about it, that would be me using a codependent bait to hook you in to get me what I want. I don't like this. You need to send me a box of food in return. Right. And so
I'm sending you chocolates afterward. Don't worry.
It worked. So that's the difference. We need to highlight that. Like I said before, it's kind of like eating. We all need food, but when we do too much food, it's unhealthy. And so that's kind of how this is. This is an unhealthy version of a secure, like if we were both secure people, we're not going to have drama over this.
Right, because there's transparency in the exchange.
Yes.
All the cards are face up on the table.
Yeah.
We're both giving and receiving value as part of the exchange.
Yeah.
Codependency, particularly a nice guy where there's an unspoken expectation. Yeah. Those cards are either face down or off the table altogether.
Right. And usually they're face down because the guy doesn't even know that he does this. Right. And that's the first step, is you have to kind of look back at your relationships and go, what was my role in that? Yeah. And then I like to talk about bait and hooks.
Yeah.
And
but before we go into that, I want to come back to again, how can a guy recognize that he is living out this kind of behavior in an acute way? If you could, because again, I'm just thinking about the guys listening to the podcast, and they're wondering, well, am I doing this? I think I'm a nice guy, but I just think I'm being nice. I just think I'm taking care of the person. How can I become aware that this pattern is playing out inside myself, like on a really like big flashing red flags? Yeah.
The easiest way is to look at the symptoms. So one that gets used a lot is I call them bait and hooks. So the bait is false kindness. I'm going to be really nice to you, and but what I'm expecting is for you to either be nice to me or to do what I want or comply to something. And the hook, the bait is false kindness. The hook is you feel obligated.
Okay.
So like if I'd sent you a box of food before this podcast, you'd be like, wow, okay, that was over the top. Now I got to ask him all the stuff that he wants, or whatever the obligation is. So if you have a history of doing that, you're probably the one who is the baiter and not getting hooked. You're the one throwing, fishing, you're throwing the bait into the water, as opposed to being the fish. So that's so if you got a history of that one, there's maybe 6, maybe 8 different symptoms like this. Another one would be empathy. Wow, empathy. So empathy is when I'm overly involved with your feelings and I want to fix them. As opposed to compassion. I can see that you're having feelings, but I'm not going to get in it with you.
Yeah.
So there's a difference. But if I'm going to use empathy and, oh, that's too bad. Here, let me pat you on the back. Here, have a cup of coffee and do all this stuff for you. You're going to start to feel a bit of shame because, God, I feel like this other person has to come in and fix this for me, and I can't even take care of it myself. And So that's a really powerful one right there.
So just to clarify, so when someone else has to be empathetic towards me a lot, that's what you mean. So if people are having to over soothe me or over I don't know, reassure me or prop me up or something. If this is I mean, obviously there are moments where we need to be consoled, but if this is sort of an ongoing regular thing, so how is that a codependency? The bait and hook. How does that?
Because I'm needing that. I have an overdeveloped need for that empathy. Because as a child, I wasn't heard. Nobody was empathetic for me. My mom was her style of parenting was cold and distant. So now I'm desperate for that kind of empathy. But here's the trick. If the one who's providing that empathy, they shift over to compassion and they say, let's put your resume together and let's help you find a job. And I'll check back with you in a week. That's that's a healthy, compassionate thing to do. If I do that and let's say you're the one that's got the need for the empathy and you're like, no, I don't want to do that. And then tomorrow you're expecting me to be empathetic again. Now we got a problem.
And if that person continues to provide just empathy, that would be sort of enabling that person to not take responsibility. And then on the other side, they're not, there's no accountability being brought into the relationship. Okay. So the dependency is I need this other person to do these things in order for me to continue maintaining an acceptable level of mood or happiness inside of myself.
I'm reliant. I'm dependent. Good. I see it. I was on an airplane one time sitting next to a woman and I told her I was a therapist. She said, oh, my son, he can't find a job and his girlfriend quit. He lives in my house. And I thought, okay, well, this guy, he's like 19, maybe 22 at worst. I said, well, how old is he? Oh, well, he's 34. Okay. So I took a risk and I said, so how old does a man need to be before he's a man? I mean, how do you shift from a child to a man? What's that shift? And what's the age? And she said, oh, well, he'll always be my baby. And so they were in a codependent relationship and she was providing whatever she was providing, but she wasn't going to let go because she was getting something back. And that's a very solid codependent relationship. That's a good example.
I've heard, I mean, maybe I'm just thinking more of like, movie scenarios and stuff, but there are a lot of men that are married and have children that still have that relationship. This pair bonding with the mother, that the umbilical cord was never really cut. Is that something that you've run into with your clients?
Absolutely. I think we were talking about it earlier. So if the wife is, and this is really common right now in our culture, the wife makes more money and she's in a managerial position, which is masculine, and comes home to a house that there's another masculine person there, but he for whatever, he needs me to mother him. And I can't do that. I'm a manager at work. And so I'm not going to do that. And so he'll create drama to get her to mother him. And lots of tension right there. So, so how do you tell a guy? That one right there, that's like one of the 8 examples. That's, how do you tell a guy that, dude, you need to buck up? You need to, how do you say that?
Well, I mean, I feel like man to man, guy to guy, we're not sleeping together. If we're not having children together, it's fairly easy for us as guys to say that, like, dude, you're being a lazy bum. You're flipping up and dude, like I don't like this. This doesn't turn me on. I don't want to hang out with this. The guy's gonna like, you're right. But if your spouse says that, that is not going to be taken the same way. And again, coming back to this conversation I was having last night, with the wife, she was talking about, with her husband, and she was like, she saw some videos online, and she's like, oh, I sent them to him to watch. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to work. And she's like, well, how? And I was like, well, what you have to do, this was just a little bit of, little pointer I said, you can say, hey, I saw these videos. This is the wife talking. Hey,
Uh-huh.
I saw these videos. You know, I really like this guy, but I'd like to know what you think.
Yeah.
And
Right.
what it is it's putting your husband on an equal footing with whoever this person is. And you're not asking him to follow. You're
Right.
asking him like, hey, I'm actually with my husband first. I want you to verify that this other man isn't full of shit.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Right.
actually, and this grin popped up on her face and she was like, oh my gosh, like that's amazing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and then she said, well, I can't do that now because I've already done it, you know, with this guy. And I said, no, you know, the next time you're laying in bed, you can say, hey, I know I sent you those videos, but like I'm looking at another video from this guy and I just want to know what you think. And she's like, you're right. Like, you know, that'll just work.
Right. Right.
But, and it's unfair that like guys, we work very directly with each other.
Yeah.
But when our partner approaches us directly in some senses, we do not respond well. We
Right.
you know,
Right.
as much as we say, just tell me,
Yeah.
that is so not true in certain situations.
Just tell me what you want.
How do you
Yeah.
sort those into the two different buckets? How do you do that
Mm.
with your
Wow.
clients, you know?
Well, I mean, you did kind of nail it. What that statement does is, here, I want your thoughts. Take a look at this. I'd love to get your thoughts. That moves from a conversation style where there's you and your opinions and there's me and my opinions.
Mhm.
And it moves to a we and us.
Mhm.
And we'll collaborate and come out with an opinion that we can work with together. But if it's you and me, then and we're not connecting, then I'm probably going to make an accusation. So when a woman sends a video to her husband, what's not being said is there's an accusation here. Like, you're not doing it right. Watch these videos so you can do it right. And so that pisses him off. And
That just goes down the board. It shuts down one button after another all the way down.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. Any accusation is going to do that no matter what. It's all accusations create defensiveness. So you have to turn, and this is a little secret in conflict style. If you're in the middle of an intense argument, we tend to take our side, but if you want to get out of that, you have to turn it into a we and us. And if this is a partner, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's the way to do it. Another way to do that in the middle of a conflict is wait. So what I'm hearing you say is this. Is that how you mean to say it? And all of a sudden now we're getting on the same line of thinking together,
as opposed to assuming I know what you mean and probably getting it at least 50% wrong, right? 50% of the time,
right? And using that to accuse you, which
and then building on top of that, and that just compounds the
exactly.
misunderstandings.
Exactly. Yeah. So, boy, I forgot your original question. It was how to separate those two out.
For me, that's always the sign of a great date, you know, is the fact that you go off on so many tangents and there's so many exciting things. And, you know, and I talk about that, you know, a guy and a girl, you're on a date. Yeah. The best dates are the ones that like, there are 12 more conversations to have. Right. Obviously we have to do it. But I mean, I practice this myself, and I talk with the men that I work with that you need to have dates with men, you know, that don't have a sexual component, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a spark, that there isn't also excitement, that there isn't also chemistry, like real chemistry happening. And, you know, in conversations like this, I love it when there's so many exciting threads to follow.
We forget.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's cool.
And for all the guys out there, this is what it looks like. If you're wondering what chemistry between two men looks like, trying to hash it out. Like neither of us have the full answers on any of this. Right. But we're both activated and feel alive as a result of it. Like this is what a good date looks like between two men. Right. You know, and if you're a woman, this is also what it should look like, really energetically. We just might be, you know, doing more later that we're not going to do. You know.
As opposed to, no, Dallas, I've got all the answers and you just need to listen to me. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of guys get into, let's just talk about male friendships, you know, and that sort of thing. Talk about, you know, because some guys, that's all they know, I think.
Yeah. So there's conversations. God, I forgot. I think it was Plato has philosophy and then philonykia. Or anyway, philosophy is to have a conversation to develop more knowledge between the two of us to develop wisdom. The other kind of conversation is a type of victory where I try and convince you of something. And it's a very different kind of conversation. And so a lot of men come at, because they're masculine, and masculinity naturally has a direction and an outcome. And if you have a different ideal or a different opinion, that's a different outcome. So now we're going to compete. And so I have to have victory over you because now we have competing opinions, as opposed to a philosophical conversation where we're going to use this to develop wisdom and collaborate. So I know I just went down that rabbit hole, but that's kind of the crux of it. It's a lot of guys have been taught that masculinity, it's always competitive, no matter what. And that's what masculinity is. And it's just not.
Well, I mean, I think competition where we're on the same team, and you know, there's a verse from the Bible, you know, like iron on iron, one man sharpens another. We do need to have that challenge. We do need to have that competition in order to bring out the sharpest, strongest, best sides of ourselves.
Absolutely.
But the word that you just used that for me really is at the crux of it is the word convince. Because convincing, I believe it's from the same Latin root as vanquish, which is to knock down, dominate, take the wind out of the sails, get you down on your knees, and now there is one of us that's standing and alive and one of us that is out of the game. There's a different type of competition where you are both in the game, but we're both getting stronger in the game. You know, sort of like the 300 movie, you know, where all the Spartans. Well, they have obviously competed with each other in brutal ways. On the same side. And then when those men that are friends, because I would definitely say, I mean, they're beyond friendship, but they're definitely friends as well. When they go out together, they are presenting a type of masculine power that no single man who is trying to convince another man can ever have on his own. And that for me, and whoever leads that group, leads that group of brotherhood, that is a healthy alpha. Where the type of alpha that is trying to convince and beat down and, you know, snarl at the other dogs so the other dogs whimper and put the tails under their legs. Sorry, that pack isn't going to be nearly as badass as the pack of 300. With the alpha that is more open and not looking to convince and is searching more of the, you know, the love of wisdom, the philosophy that you're talking about. And
another rabbit hole that connects to is what we're going to do when we have resources that are available. Like energy could be, you know, 2 to 5 years. It'll be really cheap and maybe even free electricity. And you know, that competing masculinity, that hyper masculinity works when we have limited resources, because we are ultimately competing with other people all the time for food, water, clothing, shelter, opinions, and ideals. And so what is masculinity going to look like when we have unlimited resources and we don't have to compete in a hyper way? So the way you just described that, I like to think of it as like if you've ever played on a team and you had a really good coach. The difference between a good coach and a bad coach is the good coach, like you said, we use practice to play against each other. And but the good coach highlights how it works, whereas a bad coach will find the rock star and put them at the front, and all the plays wrap around that one person. And
that's not nurturing the full team.
Exactly. So it ultimately becomes destructive. That kind of hyper masculinity, it works in a crisis, in a battlefield, in a burning building. You want people who are willing to run in and save people.
But ideally, you need a leader that inspires that in as many of the troops, as many of the EMT, you know, people as possible. You need someone that wakes that up, that leadership quality inside of each other. Because I'm sorry, like, you know, you only have so many superstars that just have it in them. The leader is the one that is infectious, you know, in that fire. And so so coming back to like male friendships, and doing that, let's say, well, I mean, I know that I'm probably an oddball, but I ask guys out, I'm at a meetup group, I'm at something, and I will like, hey man, you seem cool. Do you want to hang out sometime? I think that's happened to me maybe once or twice in my entire life, externally. And I've done it dozens of times.
Right.
And we talk about this crisis of men not having enough friends and being really isolated, in themselves. And that's obviously a massive topic in itself. But if you were to just give a couple of tips, from your history, your experience in working with men in men's groups and as a therapist, how can guys break down those barriers and get more of a synergistic, loving of wisdom, not trying to convince each other, but trying to challenge each other in a stimulating way? What would you suggest the guys do?
Put a group together around a topic of some kind. It could be my favorite one. We're kind of in the Denver area here, so there's an area, Wash Park. People go play kickball, and kickball is such an easy sport, and but it's a great way to meet people. But there's a sport at the center of it, and guys need a third thing that's sort of a topic to talk about, or to work at, or to be shoulder to shoulder with about that thing. And then once the conversations take off and trust develops, I call it a container. A container starts to develop where, all right, I trust these guys, and I'm gonna say something that I show up late. Let's say I show up late to practice. Rick, where you been? What's your problem? There's a problem with the wife, And then later, one of the guys will pull me aside. What's going on, man? And because we have that trust, now I can be a little more vulnerable, and so it's a bit of a process, and it starts with developing trust just around a particular topic.
And that trust between men, part of it is we need to have kind of played at it shoulder to shoulder for a while, so that we can establish, coming back to the relationship, coming back to a we go from you over there and me over here. We trust because we have something that we have been through together. Is that part of that trust element?
Absolutely a room full of veterans, they won't say anything in the first night. They're just completely silent, because each of them know that how deep their experience goes, and in their past they've talked about it with somebody and it didn't go well. So they need to develop the trust first
in order to be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
The feminine people of the world, mostly women, they seem to have a natural understanding that feeling is part of the conversation. And so they naturally go to that.
Gotcha.
But they're not competing so much for an outcome either. They might compete for who gets to talk the most, but it's not about the outcome.
Talking with women, or really listening to women talk about this, they say it is so incredibly complex. Usually a lot of women have told me they're envious, that male relationships require a lot less maintenance. I cannot see a guy for 5 years and we just bump into each other, and it's like we saw each other last week. And where they have told me that, the complexities, and, they would say, well, maybe it's not overt competition, but there's backstabbing, there's gossip, there's all kinds of things. It just takes a different form. The competitive dynamics. So, well, Rick, this has been awesome. I'm really enjoying this. We could probably go on for another hour.
I know.
But so I'm sure I'll have you back on again. But in the meantime, so you work with couples, and you especially work with guys, and you run men's groups. So tons to offer. You're in the Denver area, is that correct?
Right.
Okay, Denver, Colorado. So tell us, if people want to follow you, if they want to know more about you, if they want to get in touch with you, where do they go? How do they do that?
My counseling is touch base counseling. So it's touchbasecounseling.com. And if you think about it's touch base. I always thought of growing up, we used to play hide and seek, and there's always this big tree, and that's where's base, and we'd fight over who touches base, and that kind of thing. The men's groups, which is my favorite thing going on right now, is called neomangroup.com. I'm shifting everything over to Kajabi. So the domain's down right now.
It's a platform.
Yeah, Kajabi is like a video platform. So I'm putting together a bunch of videos and courses and groups and coaching. And but you'll find it on the counseling. There's a page on there for men's groups on the counseling page, on the counseling website, Touch Base Counseling. So right now I have a group that's online. It's winding down in a couple of weeks, and I got another one starting in my office. Surprisingly, I would have thought guys would love to just meet online. But I've had a lot of guys say, I work online, I do everything online, and I really want something live.
So you offer the in-person experience for people willing to get their butts out to Denver.
Yeah. And they do. So So those are counseling and men's groups. It's kind of my thing. So
wonderful. Well, thank you, Rick. This has been wonderful. Thanks for giving us a whole different perspective on what therapy sessions can look like with men, and sort of speaking to the other side, of a lot of these issues. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, I hope it helps. Yeah.
All right. I'm sure it will. All right. Thanks so much, Rick. All right. Take care.
You're welcome.
Bye.
See ya.